I took the closing shift at the tree lot mostly because nobody else wanted it. It was 2 nights before Christmas, the temperature had dropped way faster than usual, and the wind kept pushing loose branches across the asphalt like something crawling. I was wrapping the last few trees with twine, trying to finish before my fingers went completely numb when I heard the crunch of footsteps between the aisles. Slow, steady, like someone trying to stay quiet but stepping on ice anyway. I figured it was a customer who got lost from the sidewalk, or maybe a dog. We always had 1 or 2 strays sniffing around for leftover food carts left in the trash. I called out a quick, "We're closing," but nothing came back except the creaking of the big banner shaking above the entrance. I brushed it off and kept dragging a heavy Fraser fur across the frosted ground. When I leaned it against the dumpster, I turned back toward the lot and froze. A tall tree I had already moved, one I distinctly remembered because it had a weird bend in the center, was now standing perfectly upright in the center aisle, like someone had dragged it out and positioned it deliberately. I didn't like how it looked. It wasn't blown over, it wasn't lying on its side. It was standing, balanced on its stump, angled forward slightly like it was leaning toward the walkway. I tried convincing myself that my manager had moved it earlier without telling me, but even that didn't make sense. There was nobody else here. The only car in the small lot was mine. The footsteps came again, light and slow. Not behind me, between the trees. It made the needles rustle in this faint creeping way, like the sound of something brushing past fabric. I said, "Hello," again, louder this time. Still nothing. I grabbed my coat off the hook by the shed, but when I turned around, I swear that same tree with the curved trunk was now closer. Not dramatically, just enough that it didn't look like it was in the same place. I stared at it too long. My breath fogged the air and drifted around the branches, and for a moment it honestly felt like the tree was breathing along with me. The branches trembled slightly, but not from the wind. There was no wind. Everything was still. I stepped back slowly. The needles gave off this sharp smell, the strong pine scent that normally meant nothing, but in the cold silence, it made my stomach tighten. The tree seemed like it was shifting weight, only a small tilt, but definitely movement. Trees don't do that, not when they're cut, not when they're bound with twine. I walked toward the office cabin, not running, but my pace definitely sped up. The snow under my boots cracked loudly. I felt exposed, like whatever I had been hearing between those aisles was aware I was leaving. Halfway to the door, the crunching footsteps began again, but faster now, matching my pace. Not right behind me, off to the left, like something moving parallel to me through the rows of trees. I reached the door and grabbed the key with shaking hands. The lock wouldn't catch properly at first, like my fingers weren't working. I got inside just as something heavy shifted out somewhere in the dark lot. Not a clear sound, but enough that the office walls vibrated slightly. Once I locked myself in, I stood there in the dark office, listening to my own heartbeat and the distant hum of the power line outside. I didn't even turn on the lights. I didn't want to see the windows. I felt like if I looked, I'd see something pressed against the glass. My manager showed up about 20 minutes later, headlights sweeping across the rows of trees. I didn't even want to step outside until I knew he was out there calling my name. When I opened the office door, the lot looked normal again. Quiet, empty, nothing out of place, except for the drag marks. 2 long grooves in the snow started near the aisle where I saw that bent tree. They ran across the pavement, leading straight out through the open part of the gate and into the road. Not like someone carried a tree. More like something heavy was pulled, slowly, with weight shifting. My manager asked if maybe I moved something earlier, maybe dragged a tree by accident. But the marks were fresh. You could see the ice lifted in places by friction, the snow pushed to the sides. He walked around the lot with a flashlight but didn't find any animals or footprints or anything at all. The tree with the bent trunk was gone completely. Not in the aisles, not behind the shed, not in the stacks waiting for pickup. It was just gone, like it walked itself off the lot while I hid in the office. My manager chalked it up to some prank or someone stealing a free tree. But the way the drag marks wandered, first straight, then veering, then stopping abruptly before continuing, it didn't look like a person dragging something. It looked like whatever the weight was kept shifting direction on its own. I quit the next morning. The manager didn't blame me. He'd seen I was shaken. But the part that sticks with me is not the footsteps, or the tree moving, or the grooved trail leading off the property. It's that when we followed the drag marks to the edge of the road, they didn't stop because the snow ended. They stopped because the tracks suddenly vanished. No continuation, no fall, no disruption. Just perfectly clean road, like the weight that had been dragging itself forward, suddenly lifted off the ground and disappeared into nothing. I still think about it every time I see a Christmas tree lot. Those aisles full of dark green shapes standing in rows with no wind to move them. They all look the same at a glance. But sometimes, when I'm driving past and one tree seems angled just slightly more forward than the others, I speed up without even thinking about it. When we first moved into the house, the basement felt like one of those places that had too much history in the walls. The previous owners left behind old furniture, boxes of random winter decorations, and a weird smell of dust and cold cement. My dad joked that it looked like the perfect place to set up a little Christmas workshop, but even he didn't spend much time down there. The stairs creaked too loudly, and the air felt colder than it should have been, even with the heater running. About a week before Christmas, my dad went down looking for a toolbox and came back up holding something red in his hands. At first I thought it was just another decoration, but when he shook it out, it was a thick Santa coat, bright red, lined with fake white fur, heavy and old. He said it must have belonged to the previous owner, maybe something he wore for his kids when they were young. My mom laughed and told him he should wear it on Christmas Eve to surprise us. My dad hung the coat on a hook in the hallway, and for the rest of the day, it felt like whenever I passed it, the thing leaned forward slightly, like it had weight pulling it down more than a normal jacket would. I tried not to think about it. It was just a coat. That night, something woke me up. I didn't know what at first. I sleep lightly, so the smallest sounds usually do it, but this time it wasn't the heat turning on, or the ice shifting outside, or cars on the street. It was footsteps, heavy ones, slow. They walked from the living room, through the hallway, right up to my bedroom door. They stopped there for several seconds, like someone was listening. Then they kept moving. No one in my house walks like that. Not that heavy, not that slow. In the morning, both of my siblings asked if I heard Dad walking around last night. We asked him about it, but he looked confused. He said he never left the couch. My mom backed him up. She said he fell asleep watching TV and didn't get up until she woke him around 6 a.m. We laughed it off. The house was old. Old houses made noises. But the way those footsteps had paused outside my door stuck with me the entire day. Later that afternoon, my mom went down to the basement to look for wrapping paper, and a few minutes later she shouted for my dad. When he got down there, she was standing in front of the panel where the Santa coat had originally been. The hook behind the panel was empty. The coat wasn't there. She asked my dad if he took it back downstairs to put it away. He said he never touched it. My mom said maybe one of us kids moved it, but none of us had gone near it. That night, just before bed, my mom was in the kitchen putting away dishes when she froze. She called us into the room. She pointed toward the short hallway that led to the living room. Hanging on the wall, facing the kitchen, was the Santa coat. Nobody said anything for a second. My dad looked at all of us like he thought one of us was messing around. We all told him we didn't move it. He eventually laughed, but it wasn't his normal laugh. It sounded forced. He grabbed the coat, folded it, and stuffed it in the hallway closet. We didn't bring it up again. Then, Christmas Eve came. Around 11, my mom said she was going to check the basement freezer for a dessert she'd stored earlier. She turned on the stair light, went halfway down, and stopped. I was in the living room and heard her footsteps pause. Then I heard her say, quietly but clearly, "No, nope, no." She came back up looking pale. She said the Santa coat wasn't in the closet anymore. My dad sighed and said he'd go handle it. He grabbed a flashlight and walked downstairs. A few minutes passed, then a few more. When he came back up, he looked frustrated. "It's gone," he said. "The coat is just gone." We searched everywhere, behind the boxes, the laundry room, the garage, the closets, nothing. My dad kept mumbling that maybe he misplaced it, but we all knew he didn't. Around midnight, we were getting ready for bed when the hallway lights flickered. I thought nothing of it at first, but then my little brother asked my dad why he was walking around again. My dad was standing right next to him. None of us were upstairs. Footsteps, slow, heavy steps. They moved across the second floor, right above us. You could feel the weight through the ceiling. My mom grabbed her phone and whispered she was calling the police. My dad went to the staircase and shouted that whoever was up there needed to get out of our house. The footsteps stopped. The police arrived within minutes. They checked every bedroom, every closet, every bathroom, even the attic. Nothing. No windows opened, no signs of forced entry. They told us old houses can make sounds that mimic movement, but we knew what footsteps sounded like. And these were footsteps. The officer said they'd take a quick look outside before leaving. As they opened the front door, one of them paused. He shined his flashlight across the yard, then pointed. There were footprints in the snow, not ours. These were larger, spaced wider apart, leading around the entire house in a slow circle. They stopped at each window. Some prints were deep, like someone stood in place for a long time. One officer followed the tracks toward the side of the house. We all stepped outside behind him. The cold hit instantly. The tracks went from window to window before looping around to the backyard. When the officer reached the back steps, he stopped, crouched down, and lifted something from the snow. The Santa coat. It was folded neatly, placed carefully on the top step, as if someone left it there for us to find. It looked dry, no snow on it at all. The officer didn't say anything about it. He just picked it up with 2 fingers and handed it to my dad before suggesting we keep our doors locked and maybe install some cameras. For the rest of the night, nobody slept. My parents locked every window. My siblings and I stayed in the living room together. Every once in a while, we heard small creaks in the walls or soft shifting noises upstairs, but we didn't move. By morning, the coat was gone again. Not misplaced, gone. We searched every inch of the house and it never turned up. My dad eventually decided to board up the small basement panel so no one could access it. My mom insisted on installing cameras, and even though I didn't say it out loud, I was relieved. I didn't want to sleep in this house without knowing what was moving around at night. Sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet and the air gets colder than it should, I swear I still hear those slow, heavy footsteps on the floor above me, always stopping outside someone's door. And every Christmas, when we bring the decorations out, I feel like something is missing. Not because I want the coat back, because I'm afraid someone else might find it and hang it up, and wake up one night thinking their dad is walking around the house when he isn't. Christmas morning should have felt normal. Our house was quiet, the sky outside still dark blue, and frost covered the porch railing like powdered sugar. I got up earlier than everyone else because I couldn't sleep, not from excitement, but because something had woken me around 2 a.m. A dull thump on the porch, like something being set down gently but firmly. I tried to ignore it and told myself it was a branch sliding off the roof. When I walked downstairs hours later, I noticed it immediately. A small box sitting perfectly centered on the front doormat, wrapped in matte red paper with a thin white ribbon, tied so neatly it almost didn't look hand-done. No tag, no handwriting. Just a simple, quiet gift sitting there like it belonged. At first, I assumed it was from one of my relatives. My aunt sometimes dropped off little things on holidays before visiting later, but something about this one felt off. The box wasn't the kind my family used. The wrapping paper was too clean, too crisp, like it hadn't been handled much, and it wasn't snow-dusted. It looked like someone had placed it there only moments earlier. I hesitated before picking it up. The air around it felt colder, like the cold was coming from the box itself. Inside, I expected something stupid or harmless. Candy, socks, a mug, something boring. Instead, I lifted the lid and found a single Polaroid lying flat inside. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The photo showed the back of our house, taken at night. The backyard was barely visible except for a thin slice of moonlight. The windows were dark. The angle looked like it had been taken from far into the yard, close to the tree line. Underneath it was another Polaroid. This one was closer to the house. A direct shot of the living room window. The curtains were open. I could see our couch, our lamp, the edge of the Christmas tree. A third Polaroid. This one made my stomach drop. It was my bedroom window. The glass was fogged slightly, but my curtains were open just enough that a sliver of my room was visible. My desk, the corner of my bed, and a shape under the blankets. Me, asleep. I hadn't even realized I was breathing shallowly until I stepped back and felt the cold porch air burn my throat. I didn't go back inside immediately because I needed to get my head straight. I kept staring at the photos, flipping through them again, like eventually they'd make more sense. I walked into the house and called my parents to the living room. When my dad saw the Polaroids, he went quiet in a way I'd never seen before. My mom kept asking if this was some kind of prank. One of my friends thought this was funny. But I knew none of my friends owned a Polaroid camera, and none of them would sneak around my house in the middle of the night. My dad called the police. They arrived within 15 minutes, not acting alarmed, but definitely taking it seriously. They asked if we had cameras outside. We didn't. The officer said our neighbor across the street did, and maybe he'd let them review the footage. While they talked, I kept thinking about the moment at 2 a.m. when I heard that muffled thump. The realization that I'd been awake when whoever took those photos was still outside made me feel sick. The officers left to go to the neighbor's house. My parents and I just sat there with the Polaroids on the coffee table. Nobody wanted to touch them anymore. The house felt smaller, quieter, like every window had eyes pressed against it. When the officers came back, one of them asked us to step outside with them for a moment. They didn't explain why until we were on the porch, and then they told us what the camera across the street recorded. Around 2 a.m., a figure walked up the driveway, bundled in winter clothing, ski mask, hood up, heavy coat. They approached the front steps slowly and set something down on the doormat. The officer said that part matched what I heard, but the next part didn't match anything normal. After setting the box down, the person didn't leave. They stood there, completely still, not swaying, not moving their head, just standing there and staring directly at the camera across the street for long, uncomfortable minutes. The officer described it like the figure was waiting for something, or listening. When the person finally turned away, instead of walking back down the driveway, they walked around the side of the house, the side that didn't have cameras, and disappeared from view. The officer said they couldn't tell where they went after that. No return, no car, nothing. Just gone. My mom asked if they could get a copy of the footage. The officer nodded and said they were already processing it. But the way he said it, carefully, gently, made it clear they didn't expect the camera to help identify the person. The rest of Christmas felt wrong. Nobody opened presents for hours. My siblings stayed close to the couch. My parents walked around checking windows over and over. Even with the police telling us they'd patrol more, it didn't feel enough. The Polaroids stayed on the table like a reminder no one wanted to look at, but nobody could throw away either. That night, my dad set up temporary alarms on the windows. My mom stacked chairs against the doors. I slept in the living room with my siblings, even though none of us actually slept. Every noise outside felt like footsteps. Every gust of wind sounded like someone brushing past the siding of the house. I still think about the figure standing on the porch, staring directly into the neighbor's camera. The stillness of it, the patience, like they weren't just delivering the photos, like they wanted to be seen. And the worst part is knowing that whoever took those pictures had been close enough to look into my window while I slept, close enough to know exactly where I was, close enough that they could come back anytime, and we'd never hear them until they were already standing on the porch again. My best friend Jenna and I used to walk home from school through the old shopping district every December. It wasn't the fastest route, but during Christmas, the stores there went all out with their decorations. Fake snow blowing from machines, twinkling lights everywhere, holiday music echoing down the street. It always felt safe, like one of those small-town Christmas movies. There was one store, though, an old department store with tall glass windows that always looked a little different. The building had been around forever, and the owners barely updated anything. The windows had wooden frames that were cracking, the lights inside flickered constantly, and the mannequins in the display always looked like they belonged to a different era. Their clothes were outdated, their faces faded, and the whole display felt more unsettling than festive. One day after school, maybe a week before Christmas, Jenna nudged me and pointed at the department store window. "Did they add a new mannequin?" she asked. I looked. At first I didn't notice anything strange. Then I saw it, a tall figure near the back of the display, wearing a long winter coat and scarf. He wasn't styled like the other mannequins. His outfit didn't match the 1950s theme, and something about him looked off. The coat looked too new, the posture too natural. "He looks real," Jenna whispered. I laughed it off and told her they probably updated the display. But even while I said it, something didn't feel right. The new mannequin was facing slightly toward the sidewalk, like he had been positioned to watch the people walking by. The others all faced forward or to the side, posed dramatically. But this one just stood there, almost casual, hands in his pockets, chin slightly angled downward like he was looking directly at us. We walked away quickly, not talking about it anymore. The next day, we passed the same window again, but now the figure was closer to the glass. Not by a lot, just a few feet forward, enough that he now stood right behind one of the older mannequins instead of in the back. His coat still looked too clean. His shoes weren't dusty, and his hands were still tucked into the pockets like he wasn't posed, just waiting. "Okay, that's weird," I said. "I swear he wasn't that close yesterday." Jenna nodded, eyes wide. "Do mannequins get moved around like that?" "Probably," I said, but I didn't sound convincing. We stepped closer to the window. I wiped away a patch of fog from the glass with my glove. Up close, it was clear the figure didn't match the others. The hands didn't have seams. The hair under the hat looked real. The boots had creases where someone's weight would bend the leather. I felt a cold rush down my back. "That's not a mannequin." Jenna tugged my sleeve. "Let's go." So we did. The next few days, we tried taking the quicker route home to avoid passing the store. But on the Friday before Christmas break, we had to go that way. We'd stayed late for a school event, and the other streets were already blocked off for a holiday parade. When we turned the corner onto the shopping district, the department store windows glowed softly in the early evening. Snow was falling lightly, giving everything that quiet, hushed sound, and the man in the display was standing directly against the glass. His head was tilted slightly, like he was trying to look out at the street. His shoulder was nearly brushing the window, and the way he stood, feet planted naturally, knees slightly relaxed, didn't look posed at all. "He moved again," Jenna whispered. I knew she wasn't imagining it. He wasn't behind the mannequins anymore. He was in front of everything now, pushed right up to the window as if he'd been creeping forward day by day. We didn't get any closer. We didn't want to. As we hurried past, Jenna grabbed my arm suddenly. "He looked at us," she said. I turned just enough to glance back. His head wasn't angled toward the street anymore. It was angled toward us. The faint reflection on the glass made it hard to see his face, but the position of his shoulders made it obvious. He was no longer facing the sidewalk. He was facing our direction. I told Jenna to walk faster. That night, I kept replaying it in my head. The way he kept moving closer each day. The way his clothes didn't match. The way he stood so normally, like someone just waiting behind glass. The next morning, Jenna texted me saying something even worse. Her mom drove past the store early that morning and said the display looked empty. No mannequins at all. Every single one of them had been removed from the window, including the man. We met up later that day. For some reason, we both wanted to see it ourselves. Maybe to prove her mom wrong. Maybe because not knowing felt worse. When we reached the store, the windows were empty. Completely empty. The familiar, outdated mannequins were gone. The lights were still flickering, and the fake snow was still blowing gently inside the display, but the space was hollow. There was only one thing inside, a single winter boot print on the smooth floor of the display. Not a mannequin base, not a stand. A boot print. It led toward the back of the store. We didn't stay long. As soon as I saw that print, I grabbed Jenna's hand and we walked away as fast as we could without running. We didn't talk until we were blocks away. For the rest of the holiday break, we avoided that street entirely. When school started again in January, the store was closed, the windows boarded up, and a sign said the building had been sold. No explanation. I still don't know who the man in the display was. If he worked there, why didn't anyone mention him? If he wasn't a mannequin, why did he move like one? Silently, gradually, always when no one was watching. And the thing that sticks with me the most is something Jenna said later. If he wasn't a mannequin, then why did he stay so still for so many days? Sometimes, when I walk past empty stores or darkened windows, I feel like something could be standing just out of view inside, waiting, not moving, not breathing loud enough to hear, just watching behind the glass. We stayed at my grandparents' cabin for Christmas. It was the kind of place that felt frozen in time. Wooden walls, a stone fireplace, windows that looked out over the snow-covered woods. Growing up, I'd always loved it. The smell of pine, the quiet snow, the way the sunlight hit the frost in the mornings. But that year, something felt different. It was Christmas night. The fire was low in the fireplace, and my siblings were asleep upstairs. My grandparents had gone to bed hours ago. I was in the living room, half watching a movie, half listening to the wind scrape against the windows. That's when I noticed it, movement outside the huge front windows. At first, I thought it was a deer or some animal. The snow had been falling all day, and the woods behind the cabin were thick, but the movement didn't match any animal I'd ever seen. It was tall, upright, and it didn't dart around like deer do. It just stood there, barely moving, at the edge of the tree line. I froze. The figure was partially hidden by the branches, just enough that I couldn't make out details. I held my breath, hoping it was someone checking on a lost pet, maybe another cabin down the trail. But the silhouette was too still, too deliberate. I went closer to the window. The figure seemed to shift slightly, as if noticing me. I ducked back. My heart was pounding, and my brain was screaming at me to wake my grandparents. But something stopped me. The figure hadn't moved toward the cabin. It was just watching. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I dared to glance out the window, the figure was still there, sometimes moving a little closer into the open, sometimes retreating behind a tree. Morning never came fast enough. When the sun finally rose, I woke everyone up. My grandparents, seasoned in life but not this kind of fear, suggested it might be someone lost in the snow. We put on boots and went outside to investigate. The snow was fresh from last night, except for a set of footprints leading from the woods straight to the front window. The prints were deep, spaced evenly, like someone had walked slowly, deliberately, and then stopped. No footprints led away, just the single trail from the tree line to the cabin window. We followed the woods around the back of the property and found more prints scattered among the trees. But they didn't lead anywhere. They ended abruptly, as if whoever made them had vanished into thin air. The sheriff said they would patrol the area, but there was never any explanation. No one else was reported missing. No one came forward to claim they'd been walking through the woods that night. Years later, I still think about those footprints and that silhouette at the tree line. The snow has always been quiet. The wind always has a way of moving branches across the cabin windows just enough to catch your attention. And sometimes, late at night, I can't help but glance outside, half expecting to see someone. Standing silently among the trees, staring at the windows, waiting for us to notice them again. It's the kind of fear that never leaves, the kind that doesn't need to touch you to make you feel its presence. The figure was never identified, the footprints were never explained, and the sense of being watched that night has stayed with me ever since. Even now, every time I see snow falling outside my window, I remember that night, how close it felt, and how little I actually understood about what had been out there.